right? If you're afraid of something, you want to run away from it. If you're disgusted by it, you want to burn it to the damn ground. You want to get rid of it. I was reading this book at the same time, and it was just unbelievable how often Hitler referred to the people he was eradicating, you know, the Slavs and the Gypsies and the Jews and all the people he went after, as parasites and as rats and as insects and all of that. He convinced the German factory owners and so forth to increase the levels of hygiene in the factories, to get rid of the rats and the mice, to plant flowers out front, you know, to make everything look neat and orderly. And the insecticide they used was Zyklon. Well, Zyklon, to eradicate the rats and the insects, Zyklon, a slightly different formulation, was the gas that was used in the concentration camps. And think about what they went through. We can't even imagine it. So one of the things Hitler started, it's a very strange story in many ways, because Hitler was obsessed with order and cleanliness. He was a very orderly person. And he was very sensitive to disgust, you know, because you think, well, the Nazis were afraid of the Jews, you know, because they were other. And that's not right. What's more accurate is that especially Hitler, he was very sensitive to disgust. That's what it looks like. And if you're disgusted by something, then you want to eradicate it, right? If you're afraid of something, you want to run away from it. If you're disgusted by it, you want to burn it to the damn ground. You want to get rid of it. And his writings, like I read a book called Hitler's Table Talk, which was his spontaneous discussions during dinner time from 1939 to 1942. It's really another amazing book. And we had been doing some work inspired a bit by Jonathan Haidt, who's done a lot of work on disgust and the relationship between trait personality. And I was reading this book at the same time, and it was just unbelievable how often Hitler referred to the people he was eradicating, you know, the Slavs and the Gypsies and the Jews and all the people he went after, as parasites and as rats and as insects and all of that. So they were kind of put into that category. And here's a horrifying part of that story. Like when Hitler first came to power, he put in a lot of public health initiatives, including mass tuberculosis screening, which actually turned out to be a good thing. And at the same time, he went on a Beautify the Factories campaign. And so he convinced the German factory owners and so forth to increase the levels of hygiene in the factories, to get rid of the rats and the mice, to plant flowers out front, you know, to make everything look neat and orderly. And the insecticide they used was Zyklon. Well, Zyklon, to eradicate the rats and the insects, Zyklon, a slightly different formulation, was the gas that was used in the concentration camps. And so Hitler went from cleaning up the rats and the mice in the factories and the insects, and then he went into the mental hospitals and started cleaning up in there, and then like it just went broader and broader, again, sort of one step at a time. You know, and the Germans had plenty of reason to be resentful and hateful, because, I mean, think about what they went through. We can't even imagine it. First of all, there was World War I, and so there was many men, like Hitler himself, who served in the trenches. And there's one story about Hitler. He won a medal for heroism in World War I, and he was sitting around with a group of his buddies and went off to do something, God only knows what. And when he came back, they were all dead because a mine had, not a mine, I don't remember, some kind of shell had landed in the middle of them and killed them all. It's like, that changes you. You know, and then afterwards, there was all these brutalized men who'd come out of the trenches. I mean, you just can't imagine what it must have been like in the trenches, you know, especially if you were there for like a couple of years. You weren't the same person. Get out of there, you're unemployed, your country's in ruins. Then the hyperinflation hits, and every single person in Germany who ever saved any money at all is flat, bloody broke. And then there's a communist revolution brewing in Russia, and it's like, it's hell. And the Nazis came along and said, well, not only are we going to restore order and greatness, but we're going to bloody well tell you whose fault this is. It's like, and Hitler, I've studied him a lot trying to understand what happened, and Hitler was, Carl Jung called him the mouthpiece of the collective unconscious of the German people. So you imagine there's all this resentment and hatred brewing underneath the surface, and all this chaos is there, and the desire for order is like clamoring in everyone's minds. And Hitler comes along, and he's a very powerful emotional orator, and he's watching the crowd, and he listens. And when he says thing A, nothing happens. When he says thing B, everybody roars. And so he takes note of that. And it's not even conscious exactly, right? Because he's being molded by the crowd. And so they roar. And so so that's a reinforcement. That's a reward. And so then he goes down that line a little bit farther and they roar some more. And then he tries something else and it's silent.
It becomes what they want.
You bet. Exactly that, man. He acts out the dark desire of the mob. So he becomes the embodiment of the dark desire of the mob. And that's partly why he had the charisma. It's right, because there's this unconscious fantasy brewing in the back of everyone's minds. You see that to some degree now with Antifa, for example, and their proclivity towards violence. And you ask, well, just exactly what's going on there? Well, Hitler came to embody the desire of the German people for order and revenge. And he embodied that fully. And you could say, so what happened was a collaboration between him and the people. It wasn't Hitler turned everyone into Nazis. It's like, no, that's not how it worked.
I'm sure there was a lot of good people still left over who got just overrun by the mania too.
Well,
who were disgusted by it.
Well, the other thing too is that, people are not that brave. And everybody thinks, this is one of the things I teach in my Maps of Meaning class. It's like, okay, you look at Nazi Germany in the 30s and you think, well, I'd be one of the heroes who rescued the Jews. It's like, statistically, that's very improbable.
Right.
And one of the things I've learned in the last year with all this strange political, what would you say? This strange situation that I've been in is how unlikely it is for people to speak up. They just won't. Even tenured professors who are tenured, they're protected. It's like the probability they'll pop their head up and say something that might make them identifiable is very, very low.